Now, for this month, however, we have a really wonderful program. It's my great pleasure to welcome back Dr. Dan Duran. Dr. Duran has been giving programs on an annual basis through our club for a number of years now. It's become a tradition. And we always look forward to his insightful and very knowledgeable programs. He's an amazing scientist. Dr. Duran is an assistant professor at Rowan University in the Department of Environmental Science. He's an active science and scholar. He's published in many scientific fields. He's also the naturalist at Scotland County Park. Among other things, he has described 10 insect species new to science, and he's also the co-author. He's an expert on tiger beetles, and the author of the field guide, Tiger Beetles of the United States and Canada. So I'd like to give a very warm welcome this time to Dr. Dan for Beyond Honeybees, Beetles, Butterflies, Bumblebee, and other pollinators, Dr. Dan Duran.
All right, thanks for having me. Appreciate it. I always love coming here. I've been doing this for, as Rich said, I don't know, 5 years, maybe 6 years. I'm not sure. It's been a little while. I've been at Rowan for 5-6 years, so that's probably about how long I've been doing it. And as some of you know, I'm an entomologist, right? So I study insects, and we're going to talk about some cool insects today. And I really want to talk about other kinds of pollinators other than honeybees, because everybody, when you talk to people and you say, hey, pollinators are important, they always say, oh yeah, we're losing our honeybees, and it's like, that's not what I'm talking about. Now, I'm not going to bash honeybees, not going to do that. You can't get honey from any of our native pollinators, right? You're only getting that from honeybees. But I do want to kind of give a little bit more complete picture, hopefully, of all the different kinds of things that are out there that are pollinators. So what we're going to talk about is a brief overview of insect diversity and the ecological relevance of insects. I mean, you can't get much more important than insects, right? We're starting to really realize that in recent years. We'll talk about the value of pollinators to plants and to humans, right? We'll talk about some unusual pollinator and flower interactions. It's not always this nice, perfect mutualism where everybody wins and the insect gets the thing and the flower gets the thing. Oh no, there's some weird stuff that goes on. And then we'll talk about how to promote native pollinators. Okay, so there are a lot of species on the planet, right? We got about 1.6 million species of organisms have been described on planet Earth that we know of. There's actually a lot more than that. We think that there's probably about 5-ish million species in the world. There used to be numbers that were a lot higher, but we realized those were probably inflated. So right now we think there's probably about 5 to 6 million species on Earth. So we're only at a relatively small fraction, right? And if you look at this, you can see the vast majority of organisms are things like plants and insects, right? In fact, 80% of all living things are plants and insects are the much larger percentage of that, right? So out of 1.6 million species on Earth, about 1 million of those are just insects, right? So insects are so dominant on this planet. Now, like I said, we've got about 1 million species described, a lot more out there. But when people think about insects, you know, they kind of think, okay, well, pollinators are important, right? They're beneficial, but aren't they the exception, right? A lot of people, I'll get on a plane or I'll be at a family function and someone will find out that I'm an entomologist and they always ask me how to kill something. And I am not that kind of entomologist. So I'm the weird, like, let's save the insects entomologist, and that's not your standard issue entomologist. So I get this all the time, like, how do I kill things in my trees? I'm like, I really don't do that. You know, what is it that you do? And I'm like, well, I'm actually here to help save insects. Like, really? And so I get that a lot. I mean, if you go into a garden market, a garden center or something like that, right? You're going to see lots of stuff out there to kill insects, right? We've got a killer, a bunch of places on here, 7, heaven, that's weird, all kinds of stuff. You know, it's just, how do you get rid of insects? And people ask me all the time. And then my family started to realize that it was better off, rather than to say, how do I get rid of this? When they send me a text message, is this a good or a bad bug? I get that. And then they got long diatribes from me about how there's no such thing as a good or a bad bug. So now they don't even ask me anything anymore. So it worked, you know. But anyway, so how many insects are pests? Less than 1,000 species of insects are defensively pests, right? Meaning that they cause something that you can measure, some kind of veterinary, medical, horticultural, agricultural, some kind of damage that you can quantify. So about 800 to 1,000 species of insects are pests, right? So what that means is over 99.9% of insects are not pests. So maybe let's stop thinking about, well, we know there's some good ones, and think they're almost all good. Unfortunately, some of the ones that are bad are pretty bad, right? We all know this, right? And there were things that, like, if you had asked me 3 years ago to give a talk, everybody in the audience had a question about spotted lanternfly. Like, it didn't even matter. I could be saying, I don't want to talk about spotted lanternfly. Still, all the questions were spotted lanternfly, right? Now everybody's like, oh, they're not as bad as I thought they were going to be. So, you know, but still, I mean, there are some really bad pests out there. I get it. Almost all of them are introduced from other parts of the world. Just like when our insects that are native to New Jersey get introduced into other parts of the world, they often become pests there too. So it tends to work that way. Now, these are insects that all are on this slide because they're all pretty and we care about them. And I say we care about them because all of them have legal defenses, right? There's lawyers and politicians that sign paperwork that says you can't kill these or you have to do something to keep them from going extinct, right? We've got our Carner blue butterfly, we've got our Heinz emerald. Monarchs are actually petitioned to be federally endangered. They're not doing that well. They have a lot of boom and bust, and the busts are getting a lot worse. We very nearly lost them about 5-10 years ago. I can't remember what year it was, but we got down to an incredibly small percentage of what was historically found. And then here is the pinnacle of evolution, a tiger beetle. Sorry, that's what I study, right? So, sorry, it's a tiger beetle. But I was saying it was the pinnacle of evolution because I study tiger beetles. So, anyway, this is an Ohlone tiger beetle. This is so rare, it has an address. There's only one spot left in the whole world. Everything around it has been turned into housing developments or vineyards. There's almost nothing left of the remnant prairie found in Santa Cruz County, California, where this is found. Is pretty much it. It's about the size of Scotland Run Park. It's not big. That's it. Okay, now people sure care about insects when either they're pretty or they do good things for them, right? We tend, and that's really wrong, first of all. Should we only be protecting pretty things? Like, do you have to be pretty to deserve to live? That doesn't seem right, right? It just doesn't seem right, but that's the way that the game seems to be right now. But, you know, we can talk about things that insects do for us. We could say ecosystem services, right? These are defined as the conditions and processes through which natural ecosystems and the species that make them up sustain and fulfill human life. Basically, what is nature doing for you lately is what this comes down to, right? And there's, well, I'm not going to read this whole slide to you, but the whole point of this is just to show they've been able to sort of categorize all the different things that nature does for us and put them into things like provisioning services and regulating services and cultural services, all these different things. The one we're going to talk about now is pollination, which is something that keeps the earth going. Without it, there's not going to be any more life because we would lose plants, and if we lost the plants, there's nothing else because you can't have life on earth without plants. Okay, so plants really need pollinators. In fact, about 75 to 90% of plants are pollinated by insects. So not only do they need pollinators, they almost exclusively use insects. Sure, there are plants that are pollinated by the wind. There are plants that are pollinated by bats. There are plants that are pollinated by tree shrews. There's all kinds of things out there. But the vast, vast majority of pollination happens from insects, right? And the estimated value of pollination to agriculture in the U.S. is somewhere between $40 and $60 billion a year, which is a lot of money, right? But guess what? That's not even the most important part. You can eat. So who cares about money if you can't feed yourself, right? Money doesn't do you any good if you can't live. So the most important part of this is you can survive, right? Now, I just want to zoom in on this picture here real quick. Anybody know what kind of an insect that is? It is a fly, and it is a flower fly. Okay, very good. I mean, this is, you know, who am I talking to, right? But when I was looking at this picture, because I was just Googling for like Google images for cool pictures of pollinators, one of these was actually identified as a honeybee. So they do look a lot like honeybees. They don't maybe to this crowd, but a lot of people see this and they think it's a honeybee. One of the things that kind of gives away that it's not a honeybee is the fact that the head is almost all eyes. It's two giant eyes. And true flies have very big eyes and very short antennae. It also has two wings. A honeybee would have four wings, although that's really hard to see. But yes, is a fly. Thank you. So yeah, honeybees are European honeybees, right? There are no native honeybees in North America. They're mostly from Italian stock, apparently, is something that I learned recently. You know, they're not native here, but they do certainly some of the pollination of crops in North America. There's no question that some pollination is done by honeybees, absolutely. But they are not the main pollinators that we have for a vast, vast number of plants in North America. And we have about 4,000 species of bees that are native to North America. 4,000 species of bees, right? This is just one, and it's a very unusual one. None of our native bees build hives to make honey. That is totally a thing that only European honeybees do. Nobody else does that, right? So my parents don't understand this. They're like, wait a minute, I thought there were bees coming out of the ground, but bees don't live in the ground. I'm like, no, those are actually native bees. But wait, don't they live in hives? No, they don't. Only honeybees do that, right? So we had some really big boom and bust years for honeybees. In 2006, we lost 1 million colonies of honeybees in one single year. It was actually a third of all North American colonies went away in 1 year. And so they were really freaking out that year, I can tell you that. There are a whole bunch of reasons. There's about a dozen reasons why honeybees have declined at times. And there's kind of three really big ones, though. Anybody want to take a stab at one of the main reasons why honeybees have declined? Okay, so you're going for a company. Let's go even broader than that. Yes? Yep, varroa mites and hive beetles, but especially the varroa mites, absolutely. Yes? Yeah, so pesticides, right? Pesticide, which again I think is where you were going as well. So pesticides, mites, and other pests of hives like hive beetles. And then also the number one cause, and this is going to sound surprising, is starvation and malnutrition. Now, here's the thing. A lot of our areas are just monocultures of the same couple of plants. And when you go into agriculture, you might have an almond grove, and that's all there is one species. It's a complete monoculture, and they're not getting a diverse nutrition. It actually affects their ability to have a robust immune system and other things. And so it actually makes them more susceptible to some of those other factors. They're more susceptible to pesticides, mites, things like that. And so, yeah, there's, you know, and it's just because we don't have enough plants around that are, you know, native to an area and diverse in all these communities that we used to have. Here's some of our native bees. This is an andrena bee, one of our mining bees. This is an agapossamon bee, which is one of our, they call them green metallic bees. You can see why they call them that, right? Really beautiful. I've lived all over the world, and I've done field work in 22 countries. And I've never seen more beautiful bees than some of the Western Hemisphere bees, including ones native to New Jersey called agapossamon. Some of them have like bright yellow stripes on a metallic green body. I mean, they can be really, really beautiful. So people have said to me, without honeybees, could we survive? Well, we always did, right? And we really haven't relied on honeybees for, again, I'm not bashing honeybees. They're great for making honey. They really are. And they do some pollination. They really do. But many of our native bees are actually much more efficient pollinators. According to the USDA, it only takes about 250 of our orchard mason bees, Osmia lignaria, to pollinate an acre of apples, but it would take about 40,000 honeybees to do the same, right? So they're way more efficient at pollinating members of the Rosaceae, the rose family, right? And there's a number of agricultural crops that are not effectively pollinated by European honeybees. There's a number of them. These are all things that don't get pollinated very well. Almost every member of the Solanaceae, the nightshade family, things like eggplants and tomatoes and potatoes and things like that, they're not very easily pollinated because of the shape of their flower morphology. Most members of the Cucurbitaceae, things like pumpkins and squashes, they don't get zucchinis, they don't get pollinated very well by honeybees. Very, very poor pollination for members of the Ericaceae, the heath family, things like blueberries. And what is this? I showed the flower, not the fruit. I want to see if anybody knows what this is. It's not named Carl Anderson. What's that? Bacon. Oh, it does kind of look like bacon. It is a cranberry, absolutely. And in fact, I just want to show the flower picture because members of the Ericaceae often have downward pointing flowers, and the flower is said to look like a crane, hence the craneberry to eventually cranberry. That's where it comes from. So yeah, but they don't do a very, very good job at pollinating those. Now, I knew somebody who was a blueberry farmer in Hamilton, and I'm from that general area originally, and he had started to replace renting honeybees with creating more habitat for native pollinators, and he says he's had the best yields he's ever had in his entire career in the last 5 years. So I wish I tried to get him to quantify stuff before and after so we could write a paper about it, but he didn't do that. So anyway, but he swears up and down that that's the case. Here's a study by Nancy Adamson. She now works for the Xerces Society for Invertebrate Conservation, which is basically the insect conservation organization, right? And she did this study during her PhD. She was looking at the relative abundance of honeybees, bumblebees, squash bees, and sweat bees on squash flowers. And this is only showing what's coming to the flowers. This doesn't talk about efficacy, right? Some of them are still more efficient than others. And you can see that honeybees are actually a really small percentage of the, many of these plantations didn't even have honeybees. And so and squashes are again in the Cucurbitaceae family, the cucumber family, and they don't really need honeybees that much. So they were realizing that they needed to really up their bumblebees and their squash bees, which not surprisingly, squash bees really like to pollinate squashes. You know, who knew, right? So this is one of the most powerful studies I've ever seen in my entire life. This came out in what, 2014? Yeah. So I'm going to give you a couple little excerpts from this, but this study was called Wild Pollinators Enhance Fruit Set of Crops Regardless of Honeybee Abundance, okay? And so here's what they said. The diversity and abundance of wild insect pollinators have declined in many agricultural landscapes. Yeah, no question. Whether such declines reduce crop yields or are mitigated by managed pollinators such as honeybees is unclear. It's a lot more clear now. We found universally positive associations of fruit set with flower visitation by wild insects in 41 crop systems worldwide. Guess how many they looked at? 41. Okay? Every single crop system on planet Earth that they studied had wild pollinators helping to pollinate them and increase their fruit set, right? In contrast, fruit set increased significantly with flower visitation by honeybees in only 14% of the systems surveyed, which means 86% of the time you can throw more honeybees at it and it doesn't matter. It does not change anything, right? Overall, wild insects pollinate crops more effectively. An increase in wild insect visitation enhanced fruit set by twice as much as an equivalent increase in honeybee visitation. So this is really powerful, and there's a couple of things here. Here's the kind of crux of things. Right? So the blue dot is pollen deposition, right? So what you can see here is honeybees pick up a lot more pollen than wild insects, so they must be doing more pollination, right? Nope, because the actual fruit set is higher in wild insects because they're more efficient at getting it to the other parts of the flower. And so honeybees get pollen all over them. It does not mean they're effectively pollinating, right? And that's what we learned, right? So that was surprising. And then you can see over here, this is showing every single one of these crop systems, almonds, buckwheat, cotton, cherry, etc. And in every case, when there's both wild insects and honeybees, the wild insects are doing more pollination than the honeybees. In every single case. There was not one exception to that worldwide. So anyway, pretty crazy. Pretty crazy, right? And so one of the things we also know now is that there's a lot of things that are not bees that are doing pollination. It turns out bees aren't even the main pollinators in the world. Not even close. Number one group of pollinators in the world, by far, beetles. Nobody believes me when I tell them this, right? I study beetles. I mean, I wasn't surprised by this, and I'm going to show you some pictures of beetles pollinating, and I'll tell you why you never see it. But it does happen, and it happens all the time. First of all, this is very biased because of the approximately 240,000 species of plants on Earth, most of them live in the tropics. So this is much more common there. In New Jersey, beetles are not the number one pollinators. They still pollinate a lot, but this is very biased worldwide by tropical plants, right? So here we see other Hymenoptera. Hymenoptera are your bees, wasps, and ants, right? So meaning not bees, right? Wasps pollinate more than bees do. I mean, it's not super shocking. Go around in September, look at your asters, look at your goldenrods, and tell me how many wasps you see. You're going to see tons of wasps on there, right? Bees certainly do a lot, right? Wind, about 8% of plants are pollinated by wind. Butterflies and moths are about the same as wind. Butterflies and moths are a relatively small group. Flies, a little bit under the butterflies and moths, but actually in New Jersey, flies are a much higher percentage. When you get into temperate areas, flies are actually dominant pollinators in the spring and the fall, not in the summer, but more in the spring and the fall, right? All kinds of other things here. Birds, thrips are an obscure group of insects, mostly in the tropics. Bats, 165 species of plants are pollinated by bats. What do we get from bats? What's one of the plants that bats pollinate? Anybody know? Tequila. Well, agave, which means we get tequila, absolutely. Yes, tequila. I was going to say agave nectar. That's what I was going to say. But yes, you're absolutely right. We get tequila from bats. So that bottle of Patron that has the bumblebee on it should have a bat on it. Okay, but anyway, beetles. Lots of beetles pollinate flowers. This is a magnolia flower, right? And so the beetles are tiny. Beetles that pollinate flowers are mostly small. Some of them are almost microscopic. So one of the reasons you don't typically see them is they're not very big and they're not very obvious. They also aren't out for very long. A lot of them may only be out for days or weeks of the whole year. So unless you're kind of looking for them, you may never see them. And these are one of the groups of beetles that really likes to pollinate flowers, especially flowers that are white and yellow, are things in this family group called the tumbling flower beetles, the Mordelidae. Now these are caterid beetles, and caterids will get deep into flowers. They'll get into the anthers. So sometimes you can't even see them because they're wedged in there. So you may not, and they're small, they're tiny, they're like a millimeter or smaller. Now here's a big beetle pollinator, but a lot of the really big beetle pollinators kind of look like wasps and they fidget like wasps, and they're often kind of the colors of wasps. Here's a bunch of different beetle pollinators in this family called the longhorn beetles, the flower longhorns, and they are often going to be very wasp-like. This one is the one you've most likely seen on goldenrods in the fall, and a lot of times people see them and they swear to me it's a wasp. They even squeak, they make wasp sounds. And they're yellow and black, and they fidget around, and then they fly like a wasp, and they land on another flower, and everybody thinks they're wasps, but they're actually not. They're beetles. Now, beetles may be specialist pollinators, meaning they may be the only pollinators for certain types of flowers. This is not published, but this is research I'm doing with a friend of mine. First of all, anybody know what this plant is? It is a milkweed. Now, if anybody knows, not named Carl Anderson, knows what species of milkweed this is, I'm going to be so impressed. Carl? Variegata, exactly. Of course, I knew he would know it. So, I mean, he knows more about plants than I do. But anyway, this is Asclepias variegata, which is it even still extant in South? Yeah, I mean, I know it used to be, but I don't know if anybody's found it in a long time. So anyway, this plant has declined greatly from northern parts of its range. And if you go into like Alabama and Mississippi, you can still find it pretty easy. I've seen it in Arkansas, I've seen it in Mississippi, I've seen it in a few places like that. I've never seen it in New Jersey, even though it used to be in South Jersey. And I've never seen it basically north of Virginia. Well, we actually now think, and again, I'm doing some research on this, it may be the places where it has declined, or the exact places where the one beetle that seems to be its specialist pollinator may have declined in areas due to either spraying or other things we're not sure. Could be an introduced parasite. But this beetle right here, which is a type of flower scarab beetle, is regularly found when we go down to places where you can still find Asclepias variegata. You can see the pollinia are actually stuck on its tarsal spines. They actually have spines on their legs, and there's a pollinia, which is the way that the pollen in a milkweed gets transferred. It's not little individual grains. It's actually basically a suitcase of pollen that gets moved by insects, and they get stuck on their tarsal claws, and they dump them off in the next flower. So they seem to be really good at moving them, and we think this might be a beetle pollinator. Now, what do we got here? We got some flies, and sometimes I don't know what normal people know, so I ask a family member. I'm like, do people know that mosquitoes are a type of fly? Everybody tells me, no, people don't know that. So there you go. Mosquitoes are a type of fly. They're not separate group from flies. They are a type of fly. And they're a weird group of flies, but they're a group of flies. We have 65 species of mosquito in New Jersey, and guess what? Half of them don't even bite people. So there's another thing you didn't know, right? Many, many, many species of mosquitoes do not bite people. But anyway, okay, more facts about mosquitoes. Mosquitoes are significant pollinators, which nobody likes, because everybody wants good guys and bad guys. Nobody likes it to get complicated, right? But mosquitoes are not always bad. They're actually kind of good sometimes. And only male mosquitoes, only female mosquitoes bite. Male mosquitoes do not bite. So there's another thing that maybe you did not know. I don't know. So these are all other kinds of flies, and 2 of these are hover flies, right? Flower flies, hover flies, syrphid flies, if you want to say. This is actually in the another family of flies. It's going to come to me in a second. It'll come to me right after the slide. Mussidae. So this beautiful flower here, what's this? Pine barren gentian, exactly. Pine barren gentians are almost exclusively pollinated by flies. So without flies, they're in trouble. I remember I was at Drexel when we had a PhD student who was also at Drexel who was studying pollination in this flower, and he found that it was like 97% flies. It was overwhelmingly flies that were pollinating them. Now that is the baby of a hoverfly, right? So that is the larva of a hoverfly. They kind of look a little bit like caterpillars, a little bit. And here's one when I lived in Pennsylvania eating a bunch of aphids. And so they're actually predators of things that we could definitely call pests, right? Like aphids. I don't think anybody's going to be too upset if I call an aphid a pest. So yes, our syrphid flies, also known as hoverflies or flower flies, the larvae are predators of aphids and the adults are pollinators of flowers. We really like these guys, and they're pretty. I mean, they're really beautiful. Unbelievably, I think they're unbelievably beautiful, right? Many of them look like bees. Some of them look like wasps. Some of them look like other things. But I mean, you know, that looks like it doesn't even look real to me. I mean, you've got the bright red eyes. You've got this beautiful bronze thorax. You've got this beautiful black and yellow striped abdomen. I mean, just really, 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 really gorgeous. And here's the kicker, too. Without flies, there would be no chocolate. The only pollinators of cacao plants are this one group of midges, which are also flies, that are the only competent pollinators of cacao. So if you like chocolate, and who doesn't, you can't have chocolate without flies. So there you go, fun fact. And there's the cacao fruit and turning it into chocolate. I don't know how anybody figured out that you could make chocolate from this fruit, because you have to like take it and then like roast it and then ferment it and then regrind it and then separate it and then re-roast it. It's like unbelievably complicated. I don't know how anybody figured it out. So of course, butterflies can be pollinators, right? We've got some different butterflies here. Red spotted purples kind of look like they are spicebush swallowtails, and they really do actually. Or other types of swallowtails like pipevine swallowtails as well. And they're just, you know, they're not, but a lot of times people see them and they think they're swallowtails. We have all kinds of butterflies that pollinate during the day, like our hair streaks. This gray hair streak right here is a pretty common one. And then we have moths that pollinate, right? Here's a daytime flying, a diurnal moth, the snowberry clearwing moth. They're not on snowberries in New Jersey. Anybody know what their host plant is in New Jersey? In New Jersey, their caterpillars will only eat basically one thing, and it's not snowberry. It's a cool native plant. It's a vine. It's got pretty flowers. It's got coral-colored flowers. Coral honeysuckle, yes. Without coral honeysuckle, this moth cannot exist, right? Now, a lot of moths that actually pollinate at night. And so, yeah, you get your moonflowers here, and you can bring in, if you set up something like a moonflower in a garden area, you can actually have some lights or some areas where you sit down at a table, and you can watch different kinds of nocturnal moths come in and pollinate these flowers. It's really neat to watch. And then we've got daturas, right? Daturas are also going to have anything with big white flowers that are open at night are going to get moths. And these are some of the moths you might get. Pink spotted hawk moths are beautiful, absolutely beautiful, and they are out very late in the year. We're talking October, November. I remember seeing them on November 16th. I only remember it was that day because it's my brother's birthday. But anyway, I remember seeing them so late in the year. Here's one of our mandukas, one of our hornworms, right? There's a white-lined sphinx, Hyles linearis, all kinds of different cool moths that will come into these flowers. So now I want to tell you about how pollination is not always mutual or honest. There's a lot of cheating that goes on in pollination, right? So this is a honeybee trying like heck to get into this flower here, right? It's not working out. And so very often downward pointing flowers, they're just not good at getting in there. They will often slit the flower, actually destroy the flower, get the nectar, and leave. It's called nectar robbing, and honeybees do this a lot. So they actually will destroy the flower if they get too frustrated and they can't do it. Here is I think, beautiful beetle. This is a Diabrotica beetle. This is a banded Diabrotica beetle, and this is actually one of the beetles I studied for my master's. And they love to eat pollen, and they don't get a lot of pollen on their body because it doesn't stick, because their body is very smooth and very hard, and so there's no way for those pollen grains to get sucked in. So they come in, people think they're pollinating because they're in the flowers, but they're just eating pollen. They're not doing very much for the plant. Now this is where the plants cheat. Plants cheat all the time on insects, all the time. This here, what do we got? Skunk cabbage. Skunk cabbage. Skunk cabbage actually creates metabolic heat like a mammal. Literally like a mammal, they create metabolic heat. They will create an area where the snow will melt around them, and they will have flowers visible even while there's still snow around. And what they do is they give off a plant smell that smells like rotting meat, and it attracts flies. And these flies come in, and they get in there, and they're looking for the meat. They never find it because it isn't there, so they waste a lot of time and energy walking around. In the process, they pick up pollen, they pollinate the flowers, go to another flower, keep checking, but they're never going to get anything out of it other than a waste of time. So this is a deceptive signal from the flower. A lot of flowers that are dark red, like this kind of color, often smell bad and often are doing the like, oh, I'm rotting meat, come check me out. And it doesn't work out. Here's another one, right? One of our trilliums. Trilliums do the same thing. And they'll bring in all of these flies, but they get nothing from it. And here's some really cool stuff here. White turtlehead, soapwort gentian, and a couple of other ones are going to require specifically bumblebees, right? Members of the genus Bombus for successful pollination. But it doesn't look like they can get in there. It really doesn't. And when you see it start to happen, you're like, there's just no way in mechanics, it's not going to work. And it almost doesn't work, right? So you look at this here, and the bumblebee will force his heavy body into there and just slam through the flower. They often destroy the petals in the process, but they do get a lot of pollen on them, and they do successfully pollinate the flower. So this works. It's not pretty to watch, but it works. All right, so pollination is important. We saw some cool examples of some pollinators, some weird pollination things that happen. How do you promote pollinators, right? This is an important thing. There's just no way around this. You got to cut back or eliminate as much as possible pesticides, right? Because most pesticides do not care whether it's a good bug or a bad bug. There's no such thing, right? Pyrethroids kill insects. If you have a parotrophic membrane, if you're an insect with certain internal structures, you're going to get killed. Doesn't matter what kind of insect you are. You can be a butterfly, you can be a silverfish, doesn't matter, right? And so when you spray an insecticide, with few exceptions, that's how it's going to work, right? I am blown away that some of these things are even legal. They sell stuff that doesn't even kill a pest. They're just to kill indiscriminately. And that's the whole point now, is like this stuff, insect killer, backyard bug control. It's not even, this one at least says kills mosquitoes, but a lot of them, they don't even say what they're for. They're not even for anything. It's just like kill stuff. Kill first, don't ask questions later, right? Basically, that's the idea. Mosquito spraying is very certainly a significant cause of pollinator decline. I said likely, but that was overly qualifying. We know this. We absolutely know this. There's a lot of research on this, that mosquito spraying is a huge cause of pollinator decline. And I know a lot of people want to get rid of mosquitoes by spraying for them. First of all, I can tell you, it only works for like a day or two, right? Has very very low success rate and very low efficacy and very low continuity. It only works for a couple days, right? The CDC, the Centers for Disease Control, the largest organization in the world with that purpose, has said spraying for adult mosquitoes is the least effective method of mosquito control on Earth. They came out and said that. Like, there's tons of research on this, right? So, but we still do it. We do it all the time. And so in late August, in what year was that? I think 2001, in Gloucester County, South Carolina, due to a missed memo, literally a memo fell off of a board. They said, don't spray. They actually didn't give people enough time to respond, and they just went out and sprayed anyway. Apparently, they found the next morning 2.3 million dead honeybees all over the place. Note that they only counted the honeybees. They didn't count all of the native pollinators that got destroyed by this. The only thing that people seemed to care about were the honeybees, right? And so there were all kinds of terrible headlines and stuff like this. And it's just, you know, it's awful. I mean, it's awful what it does. But one thing you can do is promote pollinators by creating habitat for pollinators, right? Now, here's the thing. If you're trying to attract bees, here's the kind of inconvenient truth about bees, is the vast majority of bees, 70% of them, live in the ground. 70% of bees live in the ground. If there's no bare ground, they're gone, right? You can't have this manicured lawn like that. If that's all you have, it's fine. You can have a lawn, but you can't just have a lawn. You have to have somewhere in the backyard or somewhere where there's a little bit of bare ground if you want to attract bees. And it doesn't take much. They do not need a lot of ground. They just need little areas with some exposed surface, right? And you can see how small this bee is. You can see individual blades of grass, right? It doesn't take much ground. But most bees do nest in the ground, and so that's not going to work. There's different things you could do. I'm not going to read all of this, but if you're interested, the Xerces Society has all kinds of great information about attracting ground nesting bees. So it's XERCES Society. This is, I'm telling you, I think Agapostamon are some of the most beautiful bees in the world. Like, I really do. This one here, Agapostamon splendens, is just, oh my God, just amazing looking. They are all around here, and there's some more Agapostamon, right? They look like jewels. They look like they're made up. And you can see they don't need a lot of ground. There's a clover leaf, right? Gives you an idea of how much ground you need, right? So they'll be in, like, you know, sports fields and stuff where they don't like overspray. But you know, we spray a lot. We sure like to spray. And there you can see there's the head of one that's just waiting to come out of the ground there, a little hole in the ground. Adorable little things. By the way, here's a real big question that I get asked all the time, and I understand this question, right? People say, well, if I attract all these metallic green bees or any other kind of native bee, am I going to be at higher risk of being stung? And the answer is no, because most of our native bees either don't sting or almost never sting. I have never, in 47 years of life, been stung by one of these, and I've handled them I don't know how many times. I mean, dozens and dozens and dozens of times. They don't like to sting. There's no queen to defend. There's no reason. They don't have colony structures like a honeybee does. So there's no reason. If they sting and they die, they die. Whereas a colony member of a honeybee hive, whatever, they'll take one for the team. It's all about the team, but these are individuals, and they don't want to put themselves at risk that way. So they're very, very unlikely to sting. And many of our native bees don't even have stingers, can't even sting. These technically can. Green metallic bees can sting, but I'm telling you, I've never been stung by one in my whole life. So there are various mason bee house designs out there if you want to attract mason bees. These are great. In fact, I realize I have this exact one in my car right now. I should have brought it in. If you want to go online, you can find lots of different plans for making them, or you can buy them. This one was about $25, I think. And so, those mason bees that we said were so effective at pollinating members of the rose family, this is how you get them, right? Because like many of our native bees, they're cavity nesters, right? Most of our native bees live in the ground. Many of them live in brush, and the rest of them are in cavities like this, right? So what they would do is they would find holes in a log and they would live in there. But this is even better because the holes are really evenly spaced, and it's just perfect. It's like exactly what they're looking for. Now, you can also do something called insectary strips, right? This is awesome and has several different benefits, right? These are typically dense plantings consisting of a mix of flower species that will draw in a whole bunch of different kinds of insects, including pollinators and parasitoid wasps and flies, things that are going to eat the pests that you do want to get rid of. And these often include certain families of plants, including the pea family, the Fabaceae, the Asteraceae, the aster family, right? The Apiaceae, the carrot family. And when you do this, try to keep the plants native because it's going to have more of a benefit. I mean, you can make something that's really beautiful. I'm sorry, I think that's so much nicer in the lawn anyway, right? I mean, now this one here is in California, so you look at this and you're going to say, I don't recognize a lot of those flowers, right? Because this is California. There's California poppies, there's Phacelia, there's other different things that are going to be there that we're not going to really have here. But you can still make something that looks really beautiful here, and you want to try to stratify it with species that are going to bloom in the spring, in the summer, and the fall if you can, so you get to kind of go through this succession throughout the year. It's pretty awesome. I came up with a list a few years ago of some highly recommended native plants for the mid-Atlantic United States. This is based on 7 different criteria. All these plants meet at least 5 of those 7 criteria. If anybody's interested in this, I also have this as a PDF, which I can give out. I've done it a couple times before. I'm happy to do it again. These are all great plants for pollinators. Very few things, if anything, can beat out a couple of the plants on this list. So our goldenrods are amazing. Goldenrods do not cause hay fever. Okay, goldenrods, I'm going to say it again. Goldenrods don't cause hay fever. They can't. Okay, now I'm going to tell you something that's going to sound so shocking, you're not even going to believe me. No pretty flowers cause seasonal allergies. Okay, I'm telling you, it's not possible. Why? Why is that not possible for a pretty flower to cause seasonal allergies? Why are flowers pretty? To attract pollinators. Why do they need pollinators? Because the wind doesn't work. They don't get pollen in the air. The only way that they get pollen to move is when they get an insect to come in, pick up the pollen, and fly it away because it's sticky and it's heavy. So all the things are wind pollinated. They don't need to attract insects, and they don't need to look pretty because the wind doesn't care, right? So there's no fragrance or anything like that that's relevant. So anyway, goldenrods can't cause seasonal allergies, and they don't. And they're awesome, 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 awesome pollinator plants. Few things are better than goldenrods. I want to talk about this one here, short-toothed mountain mint. I just realized I actually have inconum, I think, in this part of the picture. But anyway, Pycnanthemum muticum and inconum, different mountain mints are amazing. I think they're beautiful. I took this picture from my yard. It's not from a catalog or anything. I took that picture. I mean, they almost look like little tiny poinsettias to me. Really, really beautiful. And smell amazing, and they attract all kinds of pollinators, especially eastern tiger swallowtails. Eastern tiger swallowtails absolutely cannot resist pycnanthemums or mountain mints, right? Really great plant. A study out of Penn State University found that of every single plant that they studied that was native and non-native to the state of Pennsylvania, this was the best plant for attracting pollinators. In fact, there was nothing else that was even close. It had the longest flowering time. It had the highest total number of pollinators, and it had the highest diversity of pollinators as well, the most number of species. So you can't do much better than this. It's like a magnet for all kinds of different butterflies and beetles and flies and different things like that. So really, really great. But there is one drawback to it. What is the drawback? It's aggressive. It is pretty aggressive. I mean, yeah, it's a mint, right? And mints, as we know, are pretty aggressive. I've never had a problem keeping on top of it. You know, you do have to do some work. If you just plant it and then forget, you're going to be in trouble. But you do have to do a little bit of maintenance to keep it from spreading too much. And then here we have butterfly weed, also known as butterfly milkweed, Asclepias tuberosa, right? This is a great plant. It's an awesome plant because it attracts many, many different kinds of pollinators, including our great spangled fritillaries. It attracts monarch butterflies, and the monarchs actually feed on it as caterpillars too, so you get multiple different benefits from monarchs. And then we have this really cool beetle here, which is a specialist only on butterfly weed. No other milkweed. This is the only species of milkweed that the blackened milkweed beetle will feed on. It's also, in case you were wondering, it's in the same family as some of those other flower longhorns I showed you. It's very closely related to those as well. All right, so you can't do too much better for a shrub or a small tree than the service berries. These are in the Rosaceae, right? They're in the rose family, and you can kind of tell that they're closely related to cherries, right? When you see them, you can kind of see that. Close to cherries and apples and stuff like that, right? There's some of the flowers. They come out real early in the spring, and they produce these beautiful fruits, depending on the species. Different kinds of things out there. This is one of my favorite pollinators. I just think these are so beautiful. One of my favorite pollinators of service berries. This is Leda enea. I don't think it has a common name. A lot of insects don't have common names. It's we could say the copper blister beetle, because enea means coppery, right? So anyway, you can see it's got this beautiful, beautiful copper body with this kind of cool metallic, bronzy greenish head and pronotum, and it's got those cool red legs with the black knees. Really neat looking thing. Cornell University Ornithology Lab says that the service berries are in the top 5 most valuable fruit shrub trees for birds as well. So it's great. You want to attract birds, you can get all kinds of things. We have our cedar waxwing here. Ooh, what do we got here? Murray? Summer tanager, of course. This is the greatest thing about this group is I can ask and someone knows every single thing that I can show you. You know, like I can't do that anywhere. I mean, there's a lot of places I could go and nobody, like, I don't know, is it cardinal? Like nobody's gonna know what that is, right? So we have all kinds of different things here. There's a red-bellied woodpecker, different kinds of things. All right, so that's what I got for you. I'm happy to take any of your questions about pollinators, about insects in general. Yes?
Why do they still advertise these ultraviolet bug zappers that are supposed to kill mosquitoes when that's the last insect it kills?
Yeah, those really frustrate me. I kind of wish I had talked about that now that you mention it. So bug zappers kill so many beneficial insects, it's not even funny. There was a study out of University of Delaware where they estimated that in the summer of 4 years in the United States probably killed about 350 billion beneficial insects with bug zappers. I don't even know how they're legal. I don't get it. But please, please, please don't. They're not effective for, as that man said, they're not effective for what they're supposed to do. They kill everything but what they're supposed to. I mean, they'll kill a few mosquitoes, but extremely few. You know, they don't do that much. They're just indiscriminate killing of nighttime flying insects. It's very unfortunate. Yeah. Yes.
I've read that bees are covered with a fuzz of branched hairs that hold the pollen.
Yes.
Almost like feathers. Beetles are smooth and shiny. How is it that beetles can be pollinators?
So a lot of the pollinating beetles also have hairs on them too. Right? So the one I showed you, the Diabrotica beetle, they are smooth and shiny like you said, but like those little Catera beetles and some of those other ones, they actually have brushes of hairs right in the pleura, right between where the top of the elytron comes down and meets with the area next to the legs. They'll often have a lot of hairs right there. So yeah, but that's a great question. Yes?
Aside from the monarch butterfly, are there any more endangered pollinators?
Bombus affinis, which is, or Bombus impatiens, one of the bombus, I'm drawing a blank which one it is now, which are our native honeybees, our native bumblebees, thank you, sorry, dyslexia. One of our native bumblebees is endangered, federally endangered. They're still not 100% sure why it just fell off the earth pretty much, because there's other species of bumblebees that are still doing fine, or relatively. But there are a bunch of bumblebees that are either rare or, and a few of our osmias, those orchard mason bees, there's a lot of close relatives of them that are very rare. Some of them are probably extinct and we have no idea because nobody's looking. So one of my colleagues just realized a couple years ago, he said, this one species of osmia just disappeared from all major entomology collections. Nobody's seen it. And he realized there hasn't been a single specimen collected in 100 years. So they're almost certainly extinct. It's hard to prove something's extinct, but like, they're just gone. There used to be all these records in the Academy of Natural Sciences from the Pine Barrens and 1800s, early 1900s, they just like that, and then they were gone. So there's probably a lot more. There's 4,000 species of bees that are native, and we have no idea how like 3,900 of them are doing. So, it's just, it's tough. If you ever want to study it, there's lots to study. Yes.
One question, one comment. So I was interested in you saying that bug zappers kill so many things in addition to maybe a few mosquitoes. Are they using ultraviolet light?
Yeah.
That just like put a light over my head because all the people who are doing mothing are using ultraviolet lights.
Yeah.
And are attracting all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, all kinds of stuff.
Lights. So the zappers are doing the very same things that they're killing.
Except for, they're instant. Like, as soon as they hit it, they're dead. Yeah.
That's interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
And I also want to compliment you on all the wonderful things that you brought to our attention tonight. One of them I just want to kind of emphasize a little bit more. You said that goldenrod is not a problem when it comes to allergies, hay fever, because it's wind pollinated. The things that are not wind pollinated, insect pollinated, it's sticky pollen because it's designed to stick to the insect.
Yes.
So you can sort of divide pollen, tell me if you disagree, but this is the way I think of it. You can sort of divide pollen into two broad kinds of pollen. There's the sticky pollens, which are designed to stick to insects, and so they don't travel well in the wind because that's not what they're designed to do. They're designed to be picked up by something coming into the flower. And then you have pollens which are not sticky because they're designed to be blown with the wind. So divide the world into two kinds of pollen.
Sure, very much. Yeah. Absolutely. Yes. Or actually, we'll
Yeah, would you like to give a mention to the evening programs that Scotland run?
Oh, yeah. Thank you. I really should have done that. So we have coming up, next Thursday, this Thursday, the 18th, we have a program called Nature at Night. It's from 7 to 8 p.m. You do have to register, although if you didn't register and you just showed up, we wouldn't turn you away. But you should register. It is going to be about snakes. And so if you don't like snakes, do not come because there will be live snakes that will be walked down the aisles for people to touch or see up close. So I know some people think that's awesome, and some people are like, oh my gosh, I got to stay away from that. So that's what we're doing on Thursday night on the 18th, 7 to 8 p.m. So feel free to come check that out. If you have any other questions about that afterwards, you can ask me too. We have, I'm trying to think what else. I think we're kind of dead in the winter. We don't have a lot going on. Every third Thursday in January, February, March, and April, we do have one of these Nature at Night programs. I don't remember what the other ones are. One of them is going to be Dr. Alicia Shenko. She's at Delaware Valley University and is a good friend of mine, and she's awesome. She's going to talk about mammals, and she's bringing skins of all these different mammals from New Jersey. We have a couple of new speakers, Dr. Matt Beeler, who's a professor at Rowan, and he's going to talk about non-snake reptiles in New Jersey, and he's going to bring in some different things, some lizards and some stuff. And then we have a new talk, and I don't remember who it is or what it's about. But sorry, we just scheduled it, so I got to find out, and I'll make sure to let Rich know who the third or the fourth person is. But yeah, so we're going to have a lot more in the spring. In April, we're having the spring wildflower talk and walk. If I look at my phone, I can tell you what date that is. I think it's April 18th or something. Let me see when that is. It is not. I may have to get back to you. Oh, it's April 13th. April 13th from 10 to 11:30 in the morning. There will be a presentation about all the cool spring ephemeral flowers that we have in South Jersey. Not all of them, but some of them. And then we'll go out Scotland Run Park and go try to see some. So that's the plan for that. More things coming. More things coming. The spring and the summer get really busy, but the winter is pretty dead for us. So. What's that? Yes. Yeah, the Scotland Park. Yes, the Scotland Run Park website will tell you all of those things on the website. Yep. Yes.
I had a question about your pollinator list. Down on the list, there was a strange category I wasn't familiar with. It was like right above bat.
Oh, it's probably thrips.
Yeah. So what are those?
Thrips are microscopic insects that mostly live in the tropics. We have some here in New Jersey. You will go your whole life and never see one. They're going to either be in the soil or in the tropics. Many of them get into flowers, but they are very, very, very small. And they're actually one of the weirdest insects in the world because they have asymmetrical heads. Yeah, they're really strange. Do you get them in raspberries? Okay. I do not, but here's another fun thing. I didn't bring one in there because I just figured it was relatively obscure, but it's a good question. Here's another fun thing about them. The singular and the plural is both thrips. So it's a thrips and a bunch of thrips. Still thrips. I had an advisor that could not do this. I was like, he just couldn't do it. He was like, well, there was a thrip there. I'm like, no, it's still a thrips. But, oh, yeah. But no matter how many times I told him this, he couldn't get it. So,
Does that mean you have an apostrophe after the S if it's a bunch of thrips?
I guess you could put an apostrophe after. But it's just an S in both cases, yeah. So good question though. Great question. Yeah.
Same thing with the word deer.
With deer, yeah, sure, exactly. And you had another question as well.
I'm going to mention a great book on bees, Buzz by Thor Hansen, and he's got a neat little quote. But what do we really know about bees? Even experts even stumble over the details. Once, while listening to the radio in my car, I heard a noted historian of science describing how early colonists arriving at Jamestown and Plymouth brought honeybees with them from Europe. If they hadn't, he explained, there would have been nothing to pollinate their crops. I nearly drove off the road. What about the 4,000 species of native bees already buzzing happily around North America?
Yeah, there you go.
There you go.
Exactly.
Yeah. Great book on Amazon.
Okay.
All right, any other questions? Yes.
I have a question. What kind of a little tiny wasp is on my fig tree? It doesn't sting badly, but it can sting.
I mean, there's literally thousands of species that could be. I'd need a picture. I would need a picture. Yeah, so many things. That's the largest group of all life is little wasps. There's probably 100,000 species of little wasp in the world in hundreds of families. So hard to know. I have to see it for sure. All right, maybe one more question.